Elon Musk recently sat down with a BBC reporter to discuss hate speech and COVID misinformation on Twitter. And the result was a masterclass in argumentation debate. We're about to see what happens when an arrogant, woke liberal confronts one of America's preeminent patriot leaders, and it's literally the only thing you need to watch today.
I would only just add that, we have spoken to people who have been sacked that used to be in content moderation, and we've spoken to people very recently who were involved in moderation, and they just say there's not enough people to police this stuff, particularly around hate speech in the company. Is that
what hate speech are you talking about? I mean, you use Twitter,
right?
Do you see a rise in hate speech?
I mean,
but just a personal anecdote, like what do you? I don't.
Personally, for you, I would see I get more of that kind of content, yeah, personally. But I'm not going to talk to the rest of for the rest of Twitter.
So you see more hate speech personally?
I would say I would see more hateful content in that.
Content you don't like or hateful? What do you mean to describe a hateful thing?
Yeah, I mean, just content that will solicit a reaction, something that may include something that is slightly racist or slightly sexist, those kinds of things.
So you think if something is slightly sexist, it should be banned?
No,
is that what you're saying?
I'm not saying anything. I'm just
curious. I'm trying to understand what you mean by hateful content. And I'm asking for specific examples. And you just said that if something is slightly sexist, that's hateful content. Does that mean that it should be banned?
Well, you've asked me whether my feed, whether it's got less or more. I'd say it's got slightly more.
That's why I'm asking for examples. Can you name one example?
I honestly don't use. You
can't name a single example.
I'll tell you why, because I don't actually use that feed anymore, because I just don't particularly like it.
But you said
a lot of people are quite similar. I only look at
hang on a second.
following.
You said you've seen more hateful content, but you can't name a single example, not even one.
I'm not sure I've used that feed for the last 3 or 4 weeks, and
then how did you see the hateful content?
Because I've been using Twitter since you've taken it over for the last 6 months.
Okay, so then you must have at some point seen for you hateful content. I'm asking for one example.
Right.
And you can't give a single one.
And I'm saying
I say, sir, that you don't know what you're talking about.
Really?
Yes, because you can't give me a single example of hateful content, not even one tweet, and yet you claimed that the hateful content was high.
Well,
that's false.
No, what I claimed...
You just lied.
What? No.
Now, Elon is just getting warmed up there, okay? This is so good. But let me point out, if you're taking notes here, what he just did there was a very good, very effective argumentation debate technique. Woke liberals often operate with generalities, whining about hate speech, racism, sexism. And what you can do in order to really engage with them is ask for specifics, such as, right? Specifically, you talk about institutional racism, but which institution? Which one is racist, and specifically why? Actually, what is racism for that matter? And you'll notice that this BBC reporter was caught flat-footed. He just couldn't cite a single example of the supposedly rampant hate speech on Twitter, and so Elon let him have it. I say, sir, then you don't know what you're talking about. You can't name a single instance of hateful content, and yet you claim that the presence of hateful content has increased. You're telling me that there's an identifiable pattern to the data, even though you can't cite a single data point. That's demonstrably false, and therefore you, a reporter for the BBC, you just lied. Now watch how this guy becomes a stuttering mess.
What I claimed,
you just lied.
What I claimed was there are many organizations that say that kind of information is on the rise. Now, whether it has on my feed or not, I mean, right, and
literally
if you look at something
one.
like the Strategic Dialogue Institute in the UK, they will say that. So
look, people will say all sorts of nonsense. I'm literally asking for a single example, and you can't name one.
Right, and as I already said, I don't use that feed. But
then how would you know that?
I don't think this is getting anywhere.
You literally said you experienced more hateful content, and then couldn't name a single example.
Right, and as I said,
that's absurd.
I haven't actually looked at that feed.
Then how would you know there's hateful content?
Because I'm saying that's what I saw a few weeks ago. I can't give you an exact example. Let's move on. We only have a certain amount of time.
Yeah, let's move on. Now, again, this is a perfect example of how the emperor has no clothes. This guy cited the Institute for Strategic Dialogue. Guess who funds the ISD? Well, of course, Bill Gates and George Soros's Open Society Foundation. It's literally an institute that exists to push far-left radicalism. And yet this BBC reporter cites it as a reputable source. Again, it's just another lie. But hey, yeah, let's move on. We've only got a certain amount of time here. You just caught me in 2 lies. But I, being the faithful propagandist that I am for the BBC, refuse to acknowledge it, and we'll just move on. Again, the joke's on him. If this guy thought that was rough, wait until you see how Elon handles him next. You're going to love it. Gang, as you can see, we are winning. A new conservative age really is rising. And while the rise of that conservative age is obviously bad news for the globalist empire, it's great news for gold. As more and more nations are going back to the gold standard, now is the time for patriots to return to the timeless value of gold and silver for the rise of a new conservative age. And that's where our good friends over at Goldco come in. Click on that link below and learn the 3 simple steps that you can take right now to protect your savings with gold and silver. In fact, Goldco are patriots just like us, and they're offering up to $10,000 in free silver while supply lasts. So don't wait. Click on that link below or visit my special website, turleytalkslikesgold.com.
Wow. COVID misinformation. You changed the COVID misinformation
Has
rules.
BBC changed its COVID misinformation?
The BBC does not set the rules on Twitter, so I'm asking you.
No, I'm talking about the BBC's misinformation about COVID.
I'm literally asking you about, you changed the labels, the COVID misinformation labels. There used to be a policy, it then disappeared. Why do that?
Well, COVID is no longer an issue. Does the BBC hold itself at all responsible for misinformation regarding masking and side effects of vaccinations, and not reporting on that at all? And what about the fact that the BBC was put under pressure by the British government to change its editorial policy? Are you aware of that?
This is not an interview about the BBC.
Oh, so you thought it wasn't?
I see now why you've done Twitter Spaces. I am not a representative of the BBC's editorial policy. I want to make that clear. Let's talk about something else. If you want to talk about the BBC,
you too.
All right, let's talk about something else.
You weren't expecting that.
Let's talk about something else.
Yeah, that was simply delicious. I mean, that was awesome. And again, an exceptional use of argumentation debate strategy. Whenever you're asked a question, the questioner always has assumptions in raising the question. And what Musk did is he pushed back on those assumptions. So if a woke liberal asks, don't you think it's racist to criticize BLM, right? Black Lives Matter. You could push back on that by asking, well, what do you mean by racist? What is racist? You see, the question entailed an assumption that we both agreed on the nature and definition of racism. But if you tune your ear to hear that assumption, you can call it out. And that's precisely what Elon just did there. The assumption was that Twitter was somehow particularly prone to pushing COVID misinformation because it relaxed its rules on what constitutes COVID misinformation. And Musk went right for the jugular. Wait a minute. What about the BBC's rampant COVID misinformation? What about your false reporting on the effectiveness of masks and your lack of reporting on adverse vaccine reactions? Doesn't the BBC at all hold itself responsible for so much faulty and false reporting? Who is the BBC to question the integrity of anyone else on the matter of COVID? You see, he forced the reporter to open up about his own assumptions, and of course he couldn't do it. He never thought about them. So he became a stuttering mess once again. This isn't an interview on the BBC. Yes, it is. In an era known as the information age, where ordinary people have access to information that bypasses the legacy gatekeepers like the BBC, whether this reporter likes it or not, now we, the people, can fact check the fact checkers. We, the people, are now in a position to fact check the legacy gatekeepers, which of course means they're not gatekeepers of knowledge and information anymore. And with this encounter with Elon Musk, the BBC just obviously learned that emerging truth the hard way. As always, make sure to smack that bell and subscribe button. You'll definitely want to check out my latest video on an old video, the corrupt DA Alvin Bragg resurfacing, all as the Democrats are hiding and panicking. You're not going to want to miss this. So make sure to click on that link, and I'll see you over there. God bless.